Welcome to the Inside Startup Investing Podcast powered by King's Crowd. As always, I'm your host, Chris Lustrino. From discussions with founders and VCs to industry experts and special guests, we want to provide you with the inside scoop on all things startup investing. Whether you're investing $50 a deal or $500,000 a deal, we have the stories you need to hear before clicking invest. From the metaverse to spaceflight and beyond, join us as we explore the world of startup investing for all. And now, on to this week's episode. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Startup Investor Podcast. Today, we are joined by two guests, Rick Bentley and James, who are the chairman and founders of HydroHash, which is a really interesting company in the crypto space. We're excited to have this conversation today to dive into a few critical topics that are going on in the crypto industry today and talk about how HydroHash is helping to figure out some of these things. So with that, I'll kick it off. Rick, great to see you. Would love for you to give us a little bit of background about yourself. And then James, I'd love to hear a little about you too and hear about what you guys are up to at HydroHash.
Sure.
Yeah, sounds great. So I'm was the Silicon Valley tech nerd, physics and engineering at UC Berkeley, and then worked a bunch of companies in the Silicon Valley area, from startups, some you may not have heard of, like General Magic, but I was also at Google full-time. I worked directly for Andy Grove of Intel fame for a while. Two companies ago I started, was backed by SoftBank and eventually bought by Uber. It was called Televoke. We merged with another company called Descartes, and Uber bought them up after a long fuse. And then I started another company called Cloudastructure, and we found crowdfunding for that one. We raised over $30 million on a Reg A plus after two Reg CFs. And I remember, Chris, you did some coverage of Cloudastructure back when it was just starting out. So appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And back when I was back at Televoke, I met James McGibney. He was CEO of a partner company called SecureTrack. And we've kept in touch ever since. We've worked together on a few projects, and this is another one we're working together on now.
Yep. Yeah, so good segue. I'm James McGibney. I've known Rick for decades. While he had his GPS company, I had mine. We partnered together. My company was SecureTrack, which then became Sapius, which then got bought by Wireless Matrix. So I'm also a former United States Marine. I served tours of duty with 3rd Surveillance Reconnaissance Intelligence Group and Marine Security Guard Battalion. I'm not as much of a nerd as Rick, but I have my master's degree from Boston University. Just completed my cybersecurity certification through Harvard. And yeah, I'm getting very caught up quickly in everything crypto mining because I know a decent amount about it, but not nearly as much as Rick does. So yeah, direct most of your questions towards him. He's the genius of the group.
That's fantastic. Well, first off, thanks for your service. But I'd love to hear from you about what you guys are up to at HydroHash, because it's a really interesting problem you're trying to work on and much needed. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So crypto mining is really interesting. And I kind of missed it. I didn't start till 2015, which people, nowadays go, oh my God, I wish I had started in 2015. But, it was late then, right? But in 2015, I bought a Bitcoin miner, a Bitmain Antminer S5. And, I plugged it in and turned it on, and the thing sounds like an aircraft taking off. It's just deafening loud. And I thought I had things figured out pretty well because we had some startup office space where the utilities were included, right? So mining's free, right? Yeah. But it was too loud for everyone, right? It just wasn't going to work. I ended up for that one. The Antminer S5 is shaped like a bread box. It's long and thin, and the fan that blows out the hot air is on the back, and it's a square cross section. Like, how can I put this thing outside, right? And but have it not get wet? So I bought a doghouse from Home Depot. I cut a square hole in the back. I put the thing inside the doghouse with the fan blowing out. So it brought in air through the door in the front that was all covered. So even if it was raining, it was bringing in dry air, right? And blew out the back. And it sat on a roof in Palo Alto and ran for about a year and a half.
Wow.
Right? Sitting on the roof going, but in an area that was noisy enough that no one ever noticed it outside, right? I ran the power Ethernet cables out the window and up to the top, right? So that was kind of my first foray into it. And then when Ethereum came out, I had a gaming rig on my PC with a pretty stout graphics card in it. I'm like, okay, I know a little bit about mining. Let me try this. So I start mining. I'm like, well, look at that. I'm making enough to buy a new gaming card every month. Huh. I'm going to go out and buy a whole lot of gaming cards. And I went to Fry's and the shelves were already bare. Like I'd already gotten there just a little bit too late again, right? So I was buying GPUs on Craigslist. I was meeting dudes in parking lots at Valley Fair Mall, handing out hundreds to buy. It looks like a drug trade to anyone who's paying attention, right? Getting GPUs. And a similar problem there. It's not just the noise, obviously, when you're air cooling with crypto. It's just an ineffective way to do heat dissipation. Air is 80% nitrogen, which is very inert, N2. It doesn't really mix with anything, so it doesn't transfer heat well at all, right? And it's not very dense, so it has low thermal capacity and low thermal conductivity, right? It's just the wrong medium, right? And that's why you look at cars, they went liquid cooled a long time ago, right? I think the Porsche 911 might have been the last holdout into the late 90s, right? But all the cars are liquid cooled. Even a Tesla battery pack is liquid cooled. Gaming PCs nowadays are often liquid cooled, right? It's just a better way to do it. So I started liquid cooling my GPU mining rigs for Ethereum. And I noticed a couple things right away. Man, it just ran a lot cooler, right? Which means you can put in more power, because the more power you put in, the faster you can hash, right? But you have to get rid of that power in the form of heat now somehow. Otherwise, it gets too hot, resistance goes up, it becomes this vicious cycle, and the thing just cooks itself, right? And it runs much more stable too. So it runs cooler, runs more stable. You can run the same amount of hardware with more power going in, even though it's running cooler. Just a way better way to do it. And so I was talking to some people in the startup space recently about, hey, oh yeah, what's hot nowadays, right? I've been busy on computer vision, AI, machine learning with cloud structure. Oh man, crypto's hot. I'm like, crypto's not hot. I was late in 2015. Like, what are you talking about? No, crypto's really hot right now. Crypto mine's like, oh, is it all liquid cooled now? I assume it's all liquid cooled now. What are you talking about? No one's doing liquid cooled. Oh, they should totally do liquid cooled. And I was like, the more I thought, I was like, well, if no one else is doing it, I'm doing it. So I grabbed James. I got a full-time job. And a tech guy we used to work with, Brad Degnan, back in me and James's days at SecureTrack and Televoke, and made him CTO. He was mining Bitcoin in 2011. He wasn't late. He was right on time. Yeah, so he doesn't need to work anymore, as you might expect. And so I've jostled him a few times to see if he wanted to get back in the mix. He's worked at Cisco and Electronic Arts. He keeps big server farms up and working at scale with near perfect reliability, right? And I've never been able to get him back into the workforce. He just wouldn't do it. I told him about this. Hey, look, we're going to crypto mine at scale with liquid cooling, and here's why. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm in. I'm totally in. So we're the three musketeers right now, and we're off to a good start.
Nice. So I'm going to ask a couple of extremely dumb questions, but just for the setting of the conversation. So first off, why is it that we have to mine crypto? Why can't one just say, we have this digital security, this is a number that will ever exist, it's limited, and be done, and then we wouldn't have to spend any time mining it? Why does mining even have to exist?
Yeah, you're talking about the proof of work versus proof of stake, right? Is really what it comes down to. And it's a good point. It's inefficient, and the reason it's inefficient is really interesting. Whenever you mine a new block of Bitcoin, that's all the transactions are recorded every 6 minutes or whatever, right? Bada bing, bada boom. And some amount of cryptography is required to do that, right? And so the deal is, the way the algorithm is set up, and with Bitcoin at least, is a small percentage of new coin will get given to the people who do all that work, right? And if it requires 1 unit of computation to do that, but everyone's like, I want to do it, and so 10 units of computation show up, right? You don't want to have an inflationary currency for crypto, when we do for the US apparently, but you wouldn't rationally, right? So you don't want to give 10 times the award. So what you do is you make it 10 times harder, right? And so if 1,000 times the computation shows up than you need, you make it 1,000 times harder. If 1,000,000 times shows up, that's kind of where we are, right? It's like 1,000,000 times harder than it needs to be, right? So Ethereum, is, as you've probably seen, is moving from proof of work to proof of stake. And that's really interesting. And instead of everything becomes easier again, but to guarantee a transaction, you say, okay, that transaction for 1.2 Ethereum, I'm a disinterested third party. I will stake my Ethereum here and say, I guarantee that transaction is correct. And if I'm wrong, take my Ethereum instead, right? So that's proof of stake. You basically say, hey, you know, I'm doing the math on my own over here. I'm putting up the money to show that I can cover that transaction, right? And so that brings the computational needs way down. Bitcoin just doesn't seem to be doing that, and it's unclear which path is going to be the best one. You know, people really do like mining, as you've seen, right? Mm-hmm. And for Ethereum, you can do some staking now, but you're really just kind of committing to the future that it's going to flip over, and you get like 7% return or something, and you can get a higher return mining on Bitcoin, right? So
we all know that mining is obviously, probably better than most, how just incredibly inefficient it is. I forget if it's like, what is it, 2,000 kilowatts of electricity for a single Bitcoin to be produced. How does HydroHash help make this whole thing more sustainable?
Yeah, so there's two things we're doing. One, we're running a more efficient model with liquid cooling, right? And that gives us an edge. And our original idea is to do hydroelectric power, right? And we're trying to get those contracts together now, but it's important we don't get locked into the wrong power source, right? It wasn't that long ago, a couple crypto mining companies bought a dam. Hey, we're going to buy our own dam, right? And that dam, rather than selling to the grid for 3 cents a kilowatt hour, can sell to the miners at 6 cents a kilowatt hour, right? And that's pretty neat, but there's only so many dams you can do that with. And Iceland has a lot of hydroelectric power, and they've stopped taking new crypto mining companies into their country. They've just blocked it because too much of their power was going to mining and not to lights and heat and dishwashers and stuff like that, right? So I think the two things are the fact that it's liquid cooled and the power source, right? And the power source, we're probably gonna have a broader portfolio of power, at least on the R&D side, right? We'd like to scale still with hydro, but there might be some natural gas or something else in to help move us along. Maybe with a solar boost for the daytime in the summertime when the grid really needs the AC, right? And so you risk losing the power to your miners, right? Solar could be okay. Then you can't do solar 24/7 because the batteries are just too inefficient, right? Too expensive.
Are you guys going to essentially build just a vast factory-looking building full of servers that are, cooled by water or liquid, whatever you want to call it, and is that what it looks like? Is it just a massive factory building full of servers? What is this physically going to look like?
Yeah, so typically the thing that seems to make the most sense, if you build a building, you can't move it, right?
Yeah.
So what makes but you can't move a dam either, right? So something has to be fixed, right? But we like our stuff to be portable, so we're putting everything into shipping containers, either 20-foot, 30-foot, 40-foot containers, right? 20-foot's probably best because more smaller ones is better than fewer bigger ones for a variety of reasons. But in any case, you put everything in a shipping container, and you can have a semi come and pick it up. And in 3 days, it can be anywhere else in the country, right? So if power here, they say, hey, we're really going to put the screws to you guys. Your power's really going up next year, next month, whatever. We can say, yeah, I got a dude named Tony with a tractor trailer, and he's going to come pick the thing up on Tuesday. And see you later, right?
So what's the economics of this? Is it, literally each box is like almost a franchise and you know exactly what it's going to produce? What does that look like?
It's really interesting. It is a leap of faith to get into mining, especially at scale. There's a lot of unknowns. You don't know what the cost of power is going to be in the future. You can try and buy ahead and lock in some contracts. That may or may not work, right? If your power company goes under, it definitely doesn't work, right? That's money you 100% lost, right? So the deal's too good to be true, it might be, right? So you don't know what the price of power is going to be. despite your best attempts. You don't know what the difficulty is going to be. So I mentioned there's the gain control on the proof of work, that if more people show up to mine, it gets harder, right? And there's also payouts decrease. So again, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are trying not to be inflationary for very good reasons. It keeps the value up, right? But that means they have to issue less and less and less and less over time. And Bitcoin asymptotically approaches 21 million Bitcoin, and then that's all there's ever going to be, right? So the final days of Bitcoin mining, everyone's going to be fighting over a millionth of a Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many unknowns. We got a big spreadsheet that we use. We try and keep track of everything, and it's just like we start mining and we do the best we can, right?
And are you going to be doing Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Solana? Like, can you be doing all of these various things, or do you have to kind of stick to one or another coin?
It's very miner specific. So you get a Bitcoin miner, it's the SHA-256, and away you go, right? And you can mine Bitcoin with that until Bitcoin maybe someday moves a proof of stake. Ethereum came out with the goal to be ASIC resistant. So let's start at the beginning. So when Brad, our CTO, was first mining Bitcoin, he was doing CPU, right? Just the CPU on your computer. And it was a big deal. He was just then switching, hey, I think I can do this on my GPU, my graphics card, and it's gonna be like 10 times faster on my graphics card. And he was just figuring that out, right? So everyone went from CPU to GPU, your graphics card. And then people started making ASICs, application specific integrated circuits. So it's chips made just to mine Bitcoin. Super efficient. That's all they do. They're just really, and so again, it's like 100 times more efficient than the GPU, and the GPU is 100 times more efficient than the CPU, kind of thing, right? So you can't really compete unless you're on the latest and greatest with Bitcoin. And what that did is, I mentioned how loud that thing was, and it took 2 kilowatts or 1,500 watts out of the wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, one circuit can barely handle. The plug would get hot, right? That it was plugged into, kind of thing. I'm like, am I going to burn down the building here, right? Like, the extension cord that went to the roof would get warm, right? Like, this is, and as loud as can be, this is not a thing that most people are going to take on. And that started to centralize the miners. And if you get most of the miners 51%, you can control what happens to Bitcoin, right? And so distribution is good. Decentralization is good. The big thing about cryptocurrency is DeFi, decentralizing this finance, right? And so Ethereum came out specifically with a goal to be ASIC resistant. And so its algorithms work in GPU really, really well. It was like made for GPUs, right? And so making an ASIC for Ethereum doesn't really help, right? Now, Ethereum, you can do a lot of other coins, Doge, whatever, right? You can do with the same GPUs as you can with Ethereum. They're often just the exact same algorithms. There's a lot of copy and paste of Ethereum out there, right? And so you can use mining software because maybe this coin is trending right now because Elon Musk just said, hey, I'm getting big into whatever coin today, right? And it goes up 1,000x, right? So you can use software that mines whatever's most profitable that minute, like that minute. And then you can take your payouts essentially in whatever coin you want, right? So we think HODL, Bitcoin, and Ethereum are the way to go. They're kind of the gold and cash of crypto, right? Respectively, Bitcoin and Ethereum. But we'll mine whatever is most profitable to the minute.
Got it. And, it's funny, you were talking about decentralized finance, and we've started to see, right, countries like the US and China talking about forming a digital currency themselves, but not decentralized. So do you think that's a natural evolution of crypto? Is that like totally stupid? Like what happens there?
That's the thing. It's really the masses against government here, right? We're trying to wrest control of currency from those who currently control it. And I don't know how deep down the rabbit hole you want to go, but Kennedy said he's going to end the Federal Reserve, and he got shot in the head, right? You're talking about people who literally own money, own the ability to make money. I mean, you think the Rothschilds or anyone else are big and important? Like the people who have the license to print money, right, are the most powerful people in the world, and they're not going to let go of it easily. Right. Right now, something like in the last 10 years, we printed more dollars than in the history of dollars before that. right? We've like doubled, maybe it's 13 years, but it's close to 10, right? We've just doubled the amount of currency, and that's fun, right? Hey, we can have a program for this and a program for that, and we need this spend and that spend, and we need bigger military and whatever else, right? We just go and do it. With Bitcoin and Ethereum and stuff, you can't do that. It's all algorithmically controlled, right? And these central governments are going to be very loath to give it up. And some are very overt, like China. Hey, all the shit's illegal except for ours, so just use ours, right? And we can make it do whatever we want, right? And that's you're right back where you started, right? You're at the other. You just been on the hamster wheel, right? You went from cash to digital to blockchain, and it doesn't matter because Central Bank of China can double the volume anytime they want to and wash everyone out and make as much for themselves and their cronies as they want to. But there's insidious ways. So let's say I give you $100 and you give me $100 worth of gold, right? Okay. I gave you $100. So let's back up one step. I give you a $100 bill, you give me 520s. We've exchanged 100 for 520s. Neither of us has to report anything to the government, right? Like everything's cool. There's no taxes involved with that, right? Okay. I give you a $100 bill, you give me $100 worth of gold. Okay. So I got your gold now, right? Well, you have to pay sales tax on that now. Right? You just sold me gold, right? So, in California, around here, most counties, it's like 8-9% sales tax, right? Okay. Now I hold that gold. Meanwhile, the government doubles the amount of dollars in circulation again. And so now my $100 worth of gold is worth $200, right? So I give it back to you and you give me $200, right? Because now dollars are worth half as much. Now the IRS says, oh, you just made a $100 profit. You have to pay income tax on that, right? So just substitute gold for Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever you want, right? And you see how they make it not as valuable as dollars to use for transactions like this, right? Because they're taxing you on it in dollars, right? And so it's just a way for them to just kind of bring down the value of it, right? The utility of it. And it's a very, it's a little insidious, right? It sounds a little reasonable. Oh yeah, you got to pay your taxes. Everyone says that, right? Well, but why? If I give you 100, you give me 520, it's going to have to pay taxes. If we trade, dollars for gold or dollar for Bitcoin, there shouldn't be any either, right? But in fact, there are. It's just a way for the government to try and keep their ability to be the only ones to print money.
And do you have thoughts? I know recently BlockFi came out. They had $100 million settlement with the SEC over what I think was their ability to allow people to lend and make interest on their crypto held assets. What did you think of that settlement? Does that improve things? Does that make things worse? Where are we at on that?
I've seen the SEC do a lot of interesting things, and far be it from me to question our betters. But when you see things like the SEC sanctioning Elon Musk, right? It's like we don't need the SEC to protect us from Tesla and Solar City and SpaceX and his satellite broadband thing. What's that one again? Starlink, yeah. Like we don't need the government to protect us from that. We need the government to get the F out of the way so we can have more of that, right? And here they are protecting us, right? And so, the scariest, I think Ronald Reagan said, the scariest words in the English language are, I'm from the government, I'm here to help, right? And so, just keep I would turn to the government and say, hey, the adults are talking, right? Like we understand this and we're not here to just maintain central control of currency. So you kids go do something else, right? The more they get involved, just the worse it's going to get. 100%. There's no two ways about it.
So in terms of, Hydra Hash as a company, you're trying to bring more sustainability, which is a huge, huge problem that a lot of people care about in the crypto space. And you're acting as Bitcoin miners and you've kind of gotten into that here. So what does the kind of grand scheme vision look like for Hydra Hash, call it 3 to 5 years from now? What does that look like?
Yeah. So if we can eke out even a little bit of an advantage over everyone else just by being just a little bit smarter or taking a little more time to plan or whatever it is, right? Or having the benefit of history, whatever, right? If we can just be a little bit more efficient, we can be the ones who stick around the longest and mine the most at the highest profitability margins, right? And, whenever you buy your miners, you reach a certain time as they get older and newer ones are coming out and more people are adding the newer, more efficient ones to the mining pools, where it costs more in electricity than it does to mine that hardware you already paid for, right? So if you have to pay $100 in electricity to mine $100 worth of Bitcoin, I guess you leave it on. But the day you have to pay $101 of electricity to mine $100 worth of Bitcoin, you're better off going out and buying $100 of Bitcoin for $100 and saving the dollar, right? And that's when the equipment finally gets retired, right? And that's why it's so important to be at the lowest cost basis for electricity too, so your capital can keep running the longest. So our intention is to just make things as efficient as physically possible. This is where my physics degree comes in handy a little bit, right? Energy in, where's every watt going, right? And a cooling fan takes power, right? And so as you run it all down, what can we really save here in the most efficient way possible? And if we can stay on top and be the most efficient, eventually we will literally be the only one left.
Interesting. And would that include acquiring and having consolidation of the miners, or it's literally just a company like Hydro Hash just gets bigger and bigger and bigger?
I would really like, my grand vision, huge vision, if I got really megalomaniac here, besides the secret layer in the volcano that powers everything, like a James Bond villain, what I would really, really like to do is make our own silicon someday. Right? Because that's where, Bitmain and others really got a chokehold on the mining industry. And it is tough to buy a miner and not get scammed, to not have it shipped 6 months late, 3 months late, whatever, right? It's tough to be a mining customer, right? And once you make your own silicon, everything else is just, a Raspberry Pi control board, right? For the in and outs and send stuff to the network. But you need the custom silicon for the algorithms, right? And if you can make that silicon, everything else is just a control board and cooling.
Very cool.
And we got the cooling figured out.
No, it's really interesting. Definitely appreciate what you guys are building. Obviously, in a super, super interesting space that couldn't be any hotter right now. No pun intended there. But I appreciate the approach you're taking for sure. So thank you so much for joining us here today on the podcast. If folks want to learn more, you can check them out on Republic. I think their raise is almost or maybe sold out, but definitely worth kind of learning more about. And I'm sure we'll see you around the block again at some point.
Thanks, Chris. Really, really enjoyed it.
Hey, have a wonderful day, both. Take care, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Inside Startup Investing. Before you go, if you enjoyed the show, please give us a like or a positive review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And be sure to like and share our latest episodes. And if you like what you heard and want to learn more about how we can help you manage your startup investing search, diligence, and management at KingsCrowd, check us out at kingscrowd.com. Thanks, and until next time, happy investing.